I stood in the hospital room, staring at the toxicology report in my trembling hands, and I finally understood why my mother-in-law had been so insistent that I drink her homemade tea every single Sunday for the past 18 months. The words, chronic arsenic exposure, blurred as tears filled my eyes, not tears of sadness, but of pure, white-hot rage. Because while the doctors were calling it a medical mystery, I knew exactly whose delicate porcelain teacup had been slowly killing me. And here's the part that still makes my blood run cold, she smiled at me every single time she poured it. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my mother-in-law tried to murder me, how I caught her, and how justice, cruel, ironic justice, played out in ways I never could have predicted. But to understand how we got here, to this moment where I'm holding evidence of attempted murder, you need to understand who Diane Morrison was. Or rather, who everyone thought she was. From the outside, Diane was perfect. And I mean that in the most suffocating way possible. She was the type of woman who hosted charity galas in her immaculate Victorian home, the type who wore pearls to the grocery store, the type whose garden was featured in the local lifestyle magazine 3 years running. She volunteered at the church. She organized the neighborhood book club. She baked cookies for every school fundraiser and remembered everyone's birthday with handwritten cards in her elegant, looping script. When my husband Michael first introduced us, I was intimidated. I'll admit that freely. I was 26, fresh out of graduate school, still figuring out how to cook more than spaghetti, and suddenly I was meeting this woman who seemed to have stepped out of a 1950s homemaking manual. Except she also had a master's degree in psychology and ran a successful therapy practice. "Mom's going to love you," Michael had said as we pulled up to her house that first time. The late afternoon sun was casting everything in this golden glow, and the house looked like something from a fairy tale, all gingerbread trim and climbing roses. I should have known better. Gingerbread houses are where children get eaten. She answered the door in a cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored slacks, her silver hair styled in soft waves, her makeup subtle but perfect. She smelled like lavender and vanilla, and when she hugged me, it was warm and lingering. "Sarah," she breathed, pulling back to look at me with these pale blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Michael has told me so much about you. Come in, come in. I've made tea." That should have been my first warning. But I was young and naive and desperately wanted her to like me. The tea was delicious. Chamomile and honey, served in delicate china cups that she told me had belonged to her grandmother. We sat in her living room, all cream furniture and fresh flowers and family photos in silver frames, and she asked me about my work, my family, my childhood. She listened with this intense focus that I later learned was a therapist's trick, making you feel like you were the most fascinating person in the world. When we left 3 hours later, I was glowing. "She's amazing," I told Michael. "I can't believe how well that went." He squeezed my hand. "I knew she'd love you." But here's what I didn't see then, what I couldn't have known, behind those warm smiles and thoughtful questions, Diane was already calculating. Already deciding that I wasn't good enough for her son. Already beginning to plan. Because to Diane Morrison, no woman would ever be good enough for Michael. He was her only child, born after years of fertility treatments, raised by her alone after her husband died in a car accident when Michael was just 3 years old. She'd devoted everything to him, every hope, every dream, every ounce of her considerable will. And I was the interloper who was going to take him away from her. Michael and I got engaged 6 months later. He proposed on a beach at sunset, got down on one knee with his mother's engagement ring, a vintage sapphire that Diane had carefully selected and insisted he use. "It's a family heirloom," she'd told me when we came to show her, her voice warm but her eyes cold. "I'm so glad it will stay in the family." The wedding planning was when things started to shift. Subtly at first. So subtly that I convinced myself I was imagining it. She loved all my ideas, right up until she gently, diplomatically, expertly suggested something different. The venue I'd chosen was lovely, but wouldn't Michael's childhood church be more meaningful? The flowers were beautiful, but white roses were traditional, weren't they? My dress was stunning, but perhaps something with sleeves would photograph better? Every suggestion came wrapped in concern, in wanting what was best for us, in her superior experience. And every time, Michael would look between us and say, "Whatever you two decide is fine with me." I started having headaches during this time. Dull, persistent aches that I blamed on stress. Wedding planning is stressful, right? Especially when your future mother-in-law is subtly undermining every decision while maintaining plausible deniability. The Sunday teas became a tradition during the engagement. Every week, without fail, we'd go to Diane's house for dinner, and she'd serve tea afterward in those delicate china cups. She always made mine special, she said, with extra honey, because she'd noticed I had a sweet tooth. I drank it gratefully. I was trying so hard to win her approval, to prove I was worthy of her son. The wedding was beautiful. I have to give Diane credit for that. It was held at Michael's childhood church, filled with white roses, and I wore a dress with delicate lace sleeves. In the photos, I look radiant. What you can't see is how exhausted I was, how I'd lost 12 pounds in the months leading up to the wedding, how my hands trembled slightly as I held my bouquet. Pre-wedding jitters, everyone said. Completely normal. Diane sat in the front row, dignified in dove gray, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. When it came time for the mother-son dance, she and Michael swayed together while she whispered something in his ear that made him laugh. I watched from my seat and tried to ignore the strange tightness in my chest. Not metaphorical tightness. Actual, physical tightness. Like something was sitting on my sternum. "Are you okay?" my maid of honor asked. I smiled and nodded, even though I wasn't. Even though I hadn't been okay for weeks. The first year of marriage should have been blissful. We had a sweet 2-bedroom house with a backyard for the dog we planned to adopt. Michael had just made junior partner at his law firm. I was teaching literature at the community college and working on my novel in the evenings. On paper, everything was perfect. In reality, I was dying. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just, slowly fading, like a photograph left in the sun. It started with the headaches and fatigue, which I'd already been experiencing. Then came the nausea. The stomach cramps. The strange rashes that would appear on my arms and legs, angry red welts that itched like fire and disappeared as mysteriously as they'd come. Stress, my doctor said after the third visit. A lot of young women experience this kind of thing. Are you getting enough sleep? Taking vitamins? I was taking vitamins. Diane had given me a special blend. Organic, she assured me, from a holistic health store she trusted. I took them religiously every morning with breakfast. The Sunday dinners continued. Every week, Michael and I would drive to his mother's house, where she'd cook elaborate meals and fuss over both of us. But especially over me. "You're looking pale, dear," she'd say, her cool hand on my forehead. "I hope you're not coming down with something. Here, drink your tea. It has echinacea, wonderful for the immune system." And I'd drink it, grateful for her concern, never noticing how Michael drank his tea from a different pot. How she'd pour mine from a special kettle she kept just for me. "Your special blend," she called it. "I make it just the way you like it." The symptoms got worse. I started losing my hair, not in clumps, but gradually, my shower drain catching more and more strands every day. My nails became brittle and cracked. I developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away no matter how much cough syrup I took. I was at the doctor's office every few weeks. They ran tests, blood work, chest x-rays, allergy panels. Everything came back mostly normal. Slightly anemic, they said. Vitamin D deficient. Maybe I should try changing my diet? Michael was worried, I could tell. But Diane was the one who really seemed concerned. "I think you should see a specialist," she said one Sunday, her brow furrowed with maternal worry. "I have a colleague who's an excellent internist. Let me make you an appointment." I should have been touched by her care. Instead, some deep, primal part of me felt afraid. But I couldn't have told you why. That's very kind, I said, my voice weak. But I'm sure it's nothing serious. Of course it's not, she agreed, smiling warmly as she refilled my teacup. But we can't be too careful. You're family now. I have to take care of you. The thing about poison is that it's patient. Especially when administered by someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Someone with a background in psychology who understands how to manipulate perception, how to gaslight, how to make you doubt your own reality. Someone like Diane. The day everything changed was April 17th. I remember the date because it was our first wedding anniversary. Michael had planned a romantic dinner at home. He'd taken the afternoon off work to cook, to set up candles, to make everything special. But I'd spent the day in bed, too sick to move, my body aching like I had the flu. Maybe we should postpone, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand on my shoulder. We can celebrate when you're feeling better. No, I insisted, forcing myself to sit up even though the room spun. It's our anniversary. I'm not going to ruin it. I made it through dinner, though I could barely eat. The candlelight hurt my eyes. The smell of the food made my stomach turn. But I smiled and laughed at Michael's jokes and pretended everything was fine, the way I'd been pretending for months. Diane called right as we were finishing dessert. Happy anniversary, you too, her voice sang through the speakerphone. I won't keep you, I just wanted to say I'm thinking of you. Sarah, darling, I hope you enjoyed the vitamins I dropped off this morning. I left them on your front porch. A special anniversary gift. I looked at Michael, confused. I didn't see any vitamins. Oh, they were in a brown paper bag, she said. Right by the door. I wanted to make sure you didn't run out, you've been so diligent about taking them. After we hung up, Michael went to check. Sure enough, there was a brown paper bag with a bottle of vitamins identical to the ones I'd been taking for months. That was thoughtful of her, Michael said, setting them on the kitchen counter. But something about it bothered me. Something about the way she'd called specifically to mention them. About the timing. I couldn't sleep that night. While Michael snored softly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Why would Diane drop off vitamins without telling us she was coming? Our house was 20 minutes from hers, not exactly on the way to anywhere. And why call to make sure I knew they were there? At 2 a.m., I got up. My hands were shaking as I went downstairs and picked up the vitamin bottle from the counter. I turned it over in the dim light from the refrigerator, reading the label. Natural Women's Multivitamin. Organic. Non-GMO. The same label I'd been reading every morning for over a year. But something was different about this bottle. The cap wasn't sealed. And when I opened it, the pills looked off. Slightly different in color from the ones I'd been taking. More yellowish. Maybe it was just a different batch, I told myself. Different manufacturing run. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I took one of the pills and put it in a small plastic bag, then hid it in the back of my underwear drawer. I'm not sure why I did it. Some instinct I couldn't name. Then I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I stopped taking the vitamins the next day. I didn't tell Michael. I didn't tell anyone. I just stopped. And within a week, I started to feel better. Not dramatically. Not overnight. But the constant nausea began to ease. The headaches became less frequent. I had energy again, real energy, not the exhausted, dragging myself through the day kind I'd gotten used to. You look better, Michael said, kissing my forehead one morning. See? I told you it was just stress. You needed to relax. I smiled and agreed, but inside, my mind was spinning. If stopping the vitamins made me feel better, that meant. No. That was crazy. That was paranoid. These were vitamins from a health food store, given to me by my mother-in-law who was a licensed therapist, a pillar of the community, a woman who organized charity events and baked cookies for children. But I couldn't ignore how much better I felt. How the fog was lifting from my brain. How I could sleep through the night without waking up in cold sweats. The Sunday dinners were harder to avoid. Michael would have been hurt if I'd suggested we skip them, and I had no good reason to give. So I went, but I became careful. I'd hold my teacup but barely sip from it. I'd push the tea around in the cup to make it look like I was drinking. I'd excuse myself to the bathroom and pour half of it down the sink. And when Diane wasn't looking, I'd sometimes switch my cup with Michael's, just to see if there was any difference. There was. Michael's tea tasted normal. Mine had a strange, slightly metallic aftertaste that I'd gotten so used to I'd stopped noticing it. Until now. "You're not drinking your tea, dear," Diane observed one Sunday, her eyes sharp despite her gentle smile. "Don't you like it?" "It's delicious," I said quickly. "I'm just not very thirsty today." "But you love tea," she pressed. "You always have 2 cups. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine," I insisted. "Actually, I'm feeling much better lately." Something flickered across her face. Just for a moment. Disappointment? Anger? It was gone so fast I might have imagined it. "Well, that's wonderful," she said, her voice warm again. "You had me so worried. Here, at least finish this cup. I made it especially for you." She pushed the cup closer to me, and I saw her hands were trembling slightly. No, I thought. No, this is insane. I'm being paranoid. This is my mother-in-law. Michael's mother. She wouldn't. But I didn't drink the tea. I started researching. Late at night, while Michael slept, I'd be on my laptop, typing searches I'd never imagined I'd need to make. Symptoms of slow poisoning. Heavy metal poisoning symptoms. Arsenic poisoning chronic exposure. The list of symptoms for arsenic poisoning read like a diary of my last 18 months: fatigue, headaches, nausea, stomach pain, skin rashes, hair loss, nerve damage, confusion. I read about famous poisoning cases. About how arsenic was called inheritance powder in Victorian times because it was so commonly used and so hard to detect. About how it could be administered in small doses over long periods, mimicking natural illnesses. About how the victim often never suspected until it was too late. I thought about the vitamins. About the tea. About how solicitous Diane had always been, always making sure I took my supplements, always insisting I drink her special blend. I thought about how I'd gotten sick right around the time of our engagement. How the symptoms had progressively worsened. How they'd only started to improve when I stopped taking the vitamins. And I thought about Diane's face when I said I was feeling better. That flash of something dark before her mask slipped back into place. I'm losing my mind, I told myself. I'm creating a conspiracy theory out of nothing. This is what happens when you spend too much time on the internet. But I couldn't let it go. I found a private laboratory that offered anonymous testing services. It cost $200 that I couldn't really afford, but I sent them the vitamin pill I'd saved, along with a strand of my hair. The waiting was torture. 2 weeks of acting normal, of going to Sunday dinners and smiling at Diane, of drinking the tea she gave me, but pouring it into the planter in the hallway when she wasn't looking, of lying next to my husband every night knowing that I was keeping this terrible secret from him. The results came back on a Tuesday. I opened the email in my car, sitting in the college parking lot between classes, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. Hair sample, positive for arsenic. Concentration consistent with chronic exposure over 12 to 18-month period. Pill sample, contains arsenic trioxide in addition to listed vitamin compounds. Concentration approximately 2 to 3 milligrams per pill. I read it 3 times. 4 times. 5. Then I threw up in the trash can next to my car. Someone was trying to kill me. Slowly, methodically, patiently. Someone was putting poison in vitamins and watching me take them every single day. And there was only one person who could be doing it. I should have gone to the police immediately. That's what a reasonable person would do with evidence of attempted murder. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because I knew what would happen. I'd accuse my mother-in-law of trying to poison me, Michael would think I was crazy, the police would need more proof, and Diane. Smart, careful, manipulative Diane would destroy any evidence and make me look like a paranoid, unstable wife trying to drive a wedge between a man and his mother. I needed more proof. Undeniable proof. So I hatched a plan. I started taking the vitamins again. Not actually taking them, I'd pocket them when Michael wasn't looking, flush them down the toilet at work, throw them away in public trash cans. But I made sure Diane thought I was taking them. And I started documenting everything. I bought a small voice recorder and started carrying it in my purse. I photographed every bottle of vitamins Diane gave me, every package she dropped off. I saved every text message, every voicemail. And I went back to drinking the tea at Sunday dinners. Not really drinking it. I'd become an expert at the art of fake sipping, at holding the cup to my lips without actually swallowing, at palming sugar cubes and dropping them in to dilute the taste so Michael wouldn't notice I was drinking something different from him. But I'd ask for to-go cups. This tea is so delicious, I'd gush. Could I take some home? I'd love to have it during the week. Diane would beam, so pleased that I appreciated her special blend. She'd pour extra into a thermos for me, make sure I had enough, insist I take more. And I'd thank her profusely, give her a warm hug, tell her how lucky I was to have such a caring mother-in-law. Then I'd take the tea straight to the lab for testing. Every sample came back positive for arsenic. I documented how I'd gotten sicker when I actually took the vitamins, how I improved when I stopped. I photographed the rashes on my skin, the clumps of hair in my brush. I got medical records from every doctor's visit, highlighting the symptoms that matched arsenic poisoning. And then I did something that Diane had taught me. Ironically, I started keeping a detailed journal. Not the facts, I had those documented elsewhere. But my feelings. My observations. Every small, telling detail of Diane's behavior. How she'd ask about my health with this particular intensity, her eyes glittering with something that wasn't quite concern. How she'd seem almost disappointed when I said I was feeling better. How she'd push the tea on me, insist I drink more, watch me while I drank with an expression I can only describe as hungry. How she'd started hinting to Michael that I seemed fragile lately, that maybe I needed psychological help, that she was worried about my mental stability. She was laying groundwork, I realized. If I died, when I died, she wanted people to think it was suicide. Mental illness. The unstable young wife who'd been depressed, who'd been seeing doctors for mysterious ailments, who'd seemed to be falling apart. And everyone would believe her. Because Diane was credible and respected and convincing. Because I was young and had been genuinely sick and had no apparent reason anyone would want to hurt me. It was brilliant, in the most horrifying way possible. I spent 3 months gathering evidence. 3 months of pretending, of smiling, of playing the role of the loving daughter-in-law while documenting my own attempted murder. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every Sunday dinner was an exercise in control. Sitting across from Diane, watching her pour tea with those elegant, manicured hands, knowing those same hands had been preparing poison for me. Listening to her ask about my health, my work, my marriage, while she subtly undermined me in every conversation. Sarah's been so tired lately, she'd tell Michael, her voice dripping with concern. I worry she's not taking care of herself. I've noticed she's been forgetting things, she'd mention casually. Little things, but still. It might be worth having her checked out. You know, Michael, depression can manifest in physical symptoms, she'd say, her therapist voice in full force. And it often runs in families. Didn't you mention Sarah's grandmother had mental health issues? She was building a narrative. Painting me as weak, forgetful, possibly mentally ill. And Michael, bless him, was starting to believe it. Maybe Mom's right, he said one night after we got home. Maybe you should see someone. A therapist, I mean. These health issues, the stress, it might help to talk to someone. I looked at my husband, this man I loved, and I saw how thoroughly his mother had manipulated him. How she'd spent his entire life shaping him, molding him, making sure he trusted her above all others. And I knew that when I finally revealed the truth, it would destroy him. But I also knew I had no choice. Maybe, I said softly. Let me think about it. That night, I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in domestic cases. Her name was Rebecca Chen, and she had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. We met in her office on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd taken the day off work, told Michael I had a doctor's appointment. In a way, I did, I was trying to save my life. Rebecca was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and perfectly styled black hair. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything, the timeline of my illness, the lab results, the documented evidence, the pattern of Diane's behavior. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. This is substantial, she finally said. But it's also going to be incredibly difficult. Poisoning cases are hard to prove, especially when the accused is a respected professional with no apparent motive. She has a motive, I said. I took her son away from her. Rebecca nodded slowly. Psychological motive, yes. But proving it in court is another matter. We need more. We need something that shows intent, premeditation. Ideally, we need her to confess. How do I get that? She leaned back in her chair, studying me. You wear a wire. You confront her, but carefully. Get her talking. People who are this calculated, who think they're smarter than everyone else, they like to brag. They want someone to know how clever they've been. My stomach churned. That sounds dangerous. It is, Rebecca agreed. But so is waiting for her to succeed in killing you. Because make no mistake, Sarah, she's not going to stop. She's invested too much time in this. And now that you've started getting better, she's probably going to escalate. I thought about the way Diane had been acting lately. More insistent about the tea. More questions about whether I was taking my vitamins. The way she'd accidentally left a bottle at our house last week, making sure I found it. Rebecca was right. Diane was escalating. Okay, I said. What do I need to do? The recording device was smaller than I expected. A tiny microphone that clipped inside my bra, a recorder the size of a credit card tucked into my waistband. Rebecca had connections with a private investigation firm, and they set me up with equipment that was both high quality and virtually undetectable. Don't be nervous, the tech guy said as he tested the equipment. The more natural you act, the better this will work. Just have a conversation. Let her talk. Easy for him to say. He wasn't about to confront his would-be murderer. I chose a Friday afternoon. Michael was at work, wouldn't be home until late. I called Diane and asked if I could come over, there was something important I needed to discuss. Of course, darling, she said, and I could hear the pleasure in her voice. She thought I was coming to confide in her, to ask for help. Maybe even to tell her I was leaving Michael. Come over right now. I'll make tea. Of course she would. I drove to her house with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. It was late October, the trees blazing with color, leaves skittering across the road. The same gingerbread house that had enchanted me 2 years ago now looked sinister, like something from a horror movie. Diane answered the door in a burgundy cardigan and cream slacks, her hair perfectly coiffed, her smile warm and welcoming. Sarah. Come in, come in. You look pale, are you feeling all right? I'm fine, I said, stepping inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and apples. She'd been baking. Sit, sit, she gestured to the living room. I'll bring the tea. I sat on the cream sofa, the same one I'd sat on for our first meeting, and I felt the recorder pressing against my ribs. In my purse, my phone was set to call Rebecca's office if I pressed a specific sequence of buttons, an emergency signal. Diane returned with the tea service on a silver tray. 2 cups, as always. 1 for her, poured from the white teapot. 1 for me, poured from the blue teapot that I now knew contained poison. So, she said, settling into her chair with her own cup. What did you want to discuss? I took a breath. This was it. I wanted to thank you, I said. She blinked, surprised. Thank me? For taking such good care of me, I continued, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. The vitamins, the tea, all your concern about my health. You've been so attentive. A small smile played at her lips. Well, of course. Your family. Am I? I asked softly. Am I really family to you, Diane? The smile faltered slightly. What a strange question. Of course you are. You're Michael's wife. Exactly, I said. Michael's wife. Not your daughter. Not your friend. Just, the woman who married your son. Sarah, I don't understand what you're getting at. I didn't touch my tea. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my eyes on her face. I think you do, I said quietly. I think you've understood from the beginning exactly what I am. I'm the woman who took Michael away from you. Her face went very still. That's a terrible thing to say. Is it? You've dedicated your entire life to him. Raised him alone, sacrificed everything for him. And then I came along and he fell in love with me, and suddenly he had someone else to put first. Someone who wasn't you. Michael loves us both, she said, her voice tight. But he can't love us equally, can he? I leaned forward. That's what you couldn't stand. That's what you couldn't forgive. He chose me to marry. Me to build a life with. And you became secondary. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? I gestured to the teacup in front of me. That's my special tea, isn't it? The one you make just for me. With extra honey. Extra, something. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the wind rustling leaves outside, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Diane's face had gone pale, then flushed. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her own teacup. I don't know what you're implying. Yes, you do, I interrupted. You know exactly what I'm implying. Just like you knew exactly what you were doing when you started giving me those vitamins. When you started making me that special tea. When you watched me get sicker and pretended to be concerned. You're being paranoid, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You're ill, Sarah. You need help. I was ill, I agreed. Chronically, mysteriously ill. For 18 months. With symptoms that got worse every time I took the vitamins you gave me. Every time I drank your tea. Funny how that works. She stood up abruptly. I think you should leave. Why? I stayed seated, forcing calm into my voice. Why should I leave before finishing the tea you made especially for me? You always insist I drink it all. What's different about today? You're clearly having some kind of breakdown. I had it tested, I said flatly. The tea. The vitamins. My hair. My blood. All tested. All positive for arsenic. The color drained from her face completely. For a long moment, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other, and I watched as her mask, the concerned mother-in-law, the caring woman, finally cracked. You can't prove anything, she said finally, her voice low and cold. Nothing like the warm, modulated tone she usually used. Actually, I can. I have months of documentation. Lab results. Medical records. Testimony from the pharmacy about the vitamins you specifically requested they compound for me. And I'm recording this conversation right now. Her eyes widened, darted around my body looking for the device. You're lying. Am I? Do you want to take that chance? I stood up now, facing her. Here's what I know, Diane. You started poisoning me shortly after Michael and I got engaged. Small doses, careful amounts, just enough to make me sick but not enough to kill me quickly. You wanted it to look natural, like a wasting illness. Maybe even like suicide, given how hard you've been working to convince everyone I'm mentally unstable. This is insane. Is it? Is it insane that a woman who never wanted her son to marry, who saw me as competition, who has a background in psychology and would know exactly how to manipulate people's perceptions, is it insane that she would try to eliminate me? Diane's breathing had become rapid, her chest rising and falling quickly. And then, to my shock, she started laughing. It was a brittle, terrible sound. You think you're so smart, she said. You think you've figured it all out. But you have no idea. So tell me, I challenged. Tell me what I don't understand. And just like Rebecca had predicted, her pride won out. Michael was perfect before you, she hissed. Happy, successful, devoted to me. We had a beautiful life together. And then you came along with your youth and your ambitions and your neediness, and you sank your claws into him. I fell in love with him. You took him from me. Her voice rose, sharp and furious. Everything I built, everything I sacrificed for, you were going to take it all. And for what? So you could play house and have babies and turn him into some ordinary suburban husband? So you decided to kill me. I decided to free him, she corrected. From you. From the mistake he'd made. He would have mourned you, yes. But he would have gotten over it. And he would have come back to me, where he belongs. There it was. The confession. Cold, clear, damning. You're going to prison, I said quietly. Her laugh was sharp. With what proof? Your word against mine? I'm a licensed therapist, Sarah. A respected member of this community. You're a sick young woman with documented mental health issues who's clearly having a psychotic break. Who do you think people will believe? The police, I said. With the evidence I'm going to give them. The recording of you just confessing. The lab results. The pattern of behavior. All of it. For the first time, real fear flashed across her face. Michael will never believe you, she said desperately. He'll choose me. He's my son. Maybe, I acknowledged. Maybe he will choose you at first. But eventually, he'll see the truth. And it will destroy him. Is that what you want? To destroy your own son? I want what's best for him. What's best for him is to be free from you, I said, and I picked up my purse. I'm leaving now. And I'm going straight to the police. I suggest you call your lawyer. I walked to the door, my legs somehow steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Behind me, I heard her make a strange, choking sound. You won't get away with this, she called after me. I'll fight you. I'll make everyone see that you're the crazy one. You're the liar. I turned back to look at her one last time. This woman who had tried to kill me, who had poisoned me for over a year, who had smiled and hugged me while slowly destroying my body. You already lost, I said. You just don't know it yet. And I walked out of that gingerbread house for the last time. I went straight from Diane's house to the police station, where Rebecca was already waiting for me. We'd planned it carefully, she had all the evidence organized, the timeline documented, the lab results certified. The detective who took my statement was a woman in her 40s named Martinez. She listened to the recording 3 times, her expression growing darker with each playback. This is one of the most calculated things I've ever seen, she said finally. Mrs. Morrison, you understand this is going to be difficult? Even with all this evidence? I understand, I said. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. But she tried to kill me. She almost succeeded. And if I don't stop her now, she'll try again. Martinez nodded. We'll get a warrant for her arrest. Tonight. But you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. This is going to get ugly. She had no idea how right she was. They arrested Diane at 8 p.m. that same evening. Michael called me at 8:47, his voice broken and furious. What did you do? He shouted. What the fuck did you do, Sarah? Michael. My mother is in jail. The police came to her house and arrested her. They're saying she tried to poison you. She did poison me, I said quietly. For over a year. I have proof. You're insane, he spat. You're fucking insane. This has to be some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding. I recorded her confessing, Michael. I have lab results showing arsenic in the vitamins she gave me, in the tea she made me. I have medical records documenting my symptoms. This isn't a mistake. There was a long silence. I want you out of the house, he said finally, his voice cold and flat. Pack your things and leave. I can't even look at you right now. Michael, please listen. But he'd already hung up. I didn't leave the house. Legally, it was half mine. But I did sleep in the guest room that night, the door locked, my phone within reach. Michael came home at 2 a.m. I heard him moving around downstairs, heard him on the phone with someone, probably his mother's lawyer. I didn't cry. I was too numb for tears. The next morning, I found divorce papers slid under the guest room door. The prosecution moved fast. With the evidence we had, the confession, the lab results, the clear pattern of poisoning, they charged Diane with attempted murder in the first degree, along with multiple counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Her bail was set at $500,000. Michael mortgaged his mother's house to pay it. The months leading up to the trial were a nightmare. Michael and I barely spoke except through lawyers. He moved in with his mother, claimed he needed to take care of her during this difficult time. His eyes when he looked at me were full of hate and betrayal. How could you do this to her? He asked once, cornering me outside the courthouse during a preliminary hearing. She loved you. She treated you like a daughter. She poisoned me, I said, keeping my voice steady. She admitted it on tape. That tape could be doctored. You could have manipulated her. Listen to yourself, I interrupted. You're defending someone who tried to murder your wife. Your actual wife. The woman you promised to love and protect. His face crumpled slightly, and for a moment I saw the Michael I'd fallen in love with. Confused, hurting, torn between the two women in his life. But then his expression hardened again. My mother would never hurt anyone. And I realized that Diane had done her job too well. She'd spent his entire life making herself indispensable, making him believe she was infallible. And even with all the evidence in the world, part of him couldn't accept that the woman who raised him was capable of attempted murder. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Diane's defense team tried everything. They argued I was mentally ill, that I'd fabricated the evidence, that the confession was coerced. They brought in expert witnesses to question the lab results, to suggest alternative explanations for my symptoms. They painted me as a manipulative, disturbed young woman who was trying to destroy an innocent mother because I was jealous of her relationship with her son. It might have worked, except for one thing, the prosecution had evidence that was impossible to refute. They'd gotten a warrant to search Diane's house. And in her basement, in a locked cabinet, they found everything. Bottles of arsenic trioxide, purchased from a chemical supply company using a fake name. Recipes and dosage calculations, written in Diane's handwriting. A journal documenting my symptoms, my deterioration, noting when I seemed sicker and when I seemed to improve. And most damning of all, research printouts about arsenic poisoning, about detection methods, about how to make it look like natural illness. She'd kept records. Meticulous, detailed records of her attempted murder. When the prosecution presented this evidence, I watched Diane's face across the courtroom. For a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, she looked almost proud. Like she wanted someone to appreciate the thoroughness of her planning, the intelligence of her method. Then her mask slipped back into place, and she was the dignified, wronged mother again. But the jury had seen that moment too. They deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. I was in the courtroom when they read it. So was Michael. When the word guilty echoed through the room, I heard him make a sound, low and broken, like something inside him had shattered. Diane didn't react at all. She just sat there, perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. The judge sentenced her to 25 years to life. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. Not with hatred, but with something worse, satisfaction. She'd lost, yes. But she'd still won, in a way. Because Michael would never forgive me. Our marriage was destroyed. And even from prison, she'd still have her son's loyalty. At least, that's what she thought. Diane was sent to a women's correctional facility about 3 hours north of the city. Medium security, given her age and the fact that she wasn't considered a violent threat to other inmates. I didn't expect to hear from her. Why would I? I was the person who'd put her in prison. But 6 months into her sentence, I got a letter. It was written on prison stationery, in her elegant handwriting. The same script she'd used to write me birthday cards and thank you notes. Dear Sarah. **I imagine you're surprised to receive this. I'll admit, I surprised myself by writing it **. I've had a lot of time to think these past months. About what I did. About why I did it. About you **. I want you to know that I don't regret trying to kill you. I'm not going to pretend I do, because we're past pretense now, aren't we? You took my son from me, and I responded the only way that made sense at the time **. But I will say this, I underestimated you. I thought you were weak, pliable, someone I could easily remove. I was wrong **. You're stronger than you look, Sarah. Smarter. More determined. In another life, I think we might have been friends. Or enemies worth respecting, at least **. Michael still writes to me, you know. He visits every month. He's filing for divorce from you, as I'm sure you're aware. He says he can never trust you again **. I should be happy about that. And yet, I find I'm not. Because I've watched what this has done to him, the guilt, the confusion, the way he can't reconcile the mother he loves with the woman who did what I did. And I realize I didn't just try to kill you, Sarah. I destroyed my son in the process **. That, I do regret. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it and wouldn't know what to do with it if you offered. I'm simply telling you the truth, you won. You were smarter, braver, more ruthless when it counted **. Take care of yourself. Stay vigilant. And if you ever find it in your heart to forgive Michael for choosing me over you, even after everything, please do. He doesn't deserve to suffer for my sins **. Diane. I read that letter 10 times, trying to find manipulation in it, some hidden agenda. But it just seemed sad. The rambling thoughts of a woman who'd lost everything and was finally seeing clearly what she'd destroyed. I never wrote back. Diane Morrison died in prison on March 3, exactly 18 months after she was incarcerated. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest, but the prison doctor noted she'd been refusing treatment for various ailments, not eating properly, deteriorating rapidly. Some people said it was the stress. Others whispered that it was suicide by neglect. That she'd simply given up. I think the truth was simpler, she couldn't survive without Michael, and despite his visits, despite his loyalty, she'd finally understood that she'd lost him. Maybe not his love, but his innocence. She'd forced him to see her as she truly was, and that knowledge had broken something fundamental between them. Michael called me when she died. It was the first time we'd spoken in over a year. She's gone, he said, his voice hollow. My mom is gone. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Not for Diane, but for him. For the loss of the mother he'd believed in, the safe world she'd created for him that turned out to be built on manipulation and control. She left you something, he continued. In her will. A letter. I don't want it. I think you need it, he said quietly. Please, Sarah. For me. So I agreed to meet him. One last time. At a coffee shop halfway between our old house and my new apartment. He looked terrible. Thin, hollow-eyed, aged beyond his 32 years. The divorce had gone through 6 months earlier. He'd signed the papers without contesting anything, let me keep more than I was entitled to. Guilt, I supposed. Or maybe exhaustion. He slid an envelope across the table to me. It was sealed with wax, like something from a different era. I haven't read it, he said. It was addressed to you. I took it, felt the weight of it in my hands. How are you doing? I asked. He laughed bitterly. How do you think? My mother tried to murder my wife. And I didn't believe my wife. I chose the person who was poisoning you over the person I'd promised to love and protect. How do you think I'm doing? Michael. No, he cut me off. I need to say this. I need you to know that I know. I was wrong. I was so fucking wrong, and there's no way to make that right. You almost died, Sarah. You almost died, and I made you the villain. You loved your mother, I said softly. That's not a crime. It is when that love blinds you to evil, he countered. Diane used to say that the hardest thing about being a therapist was maintaining boundaries. That you had to be able to see people clearly, without sentiment clouding your judgment. Turns out I never learned that lesson. We sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd once promised forever to each other, now strangers connected only by trauma. I should go, I said finally. Yeah, he agreed. But Sarah? I am sorry. For everything. And I hope you find happiness. Real happiness. You deserve it. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left. I opened Diane's letter that night in my apartment, a glass of wine in hand, my cat curled up beside me on the couch. Sarah. Asterisk if you're reading this, I'm dead. Probably not a surprise asterisk. Asterisk I've spent my last months thinking about what I did to you. To Michael. To myself. And I've come to a realization that might interest you asterisk. I was wrong. Asterisk not about poisoning you, I still believe you took my son from me, and my response, while extreme, made sense in the moment. But I was wrong about what would happen after asterisk. Asterisk I thought that removing you would restore my relationship with Michael. That we would grieve you together and then return to the life we had before. That he would be mine again, completely asterisk. Instead, I destroyed the one thing I was trying to preserve. Asterisk Michael looks at me now with this horrible knowledge in his eyes. He still loves me, he can't help that, I made sure of it, but he also knows what I am. What I'm capable of. And that knowledge has poisoned our relationship far more effectively than any arsenic asterisk. Asterisk I think about you often. Wonder how you're doing. Whether you've recovered, physically and emotionally. Whether you think of me asterisk. Asterisk I hope you don't. I hope you've moved on, found someone better than my son, someone who will believe you when you need them to, built a life that's entirely free from the Morrison family curse asterisk. Asterisk because that's what I was, Sarah. A curse. A woman so consumed by possessive love that I couldn't see I was destroying the very person I claimed to cherish asterisk. Asterisk you saved yourself. But more than that, you saved Michael. By exposing me, by forcing him to see the truth, you freed him from the prison I'd built around his heart. He doesn't see it that way yet. maybe he never will. But it's true, asterisk. Asterisk, I'm dying now. I can feel it. And I'm letting myself go because there's nothing left to fight for. I've lost everything that mattered. My freedom, my reputation, my son's trust, asterisk. Asterisk, but strangely, I'm at peace. Because for the first time in my life, I'm being completely honest. No masks, no manipulation, no carefully crafted persona. Just the truth, asterisk. Asterisk, and the truth is this: I was a monster who convinced herself she was a martyr. I hurt you terribly in the name of love. And I deserve every consequence that followed, asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry, Sarah. Not for trying to kill you, I'm too broken to genuinely regret that impulse. But for not recognizing sooner that the real poison wasn't in the teacup. It was in me. It always was, asterisk. May you live the long, beautiful life I tried to steal from you. Diane Morrison. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I walked to my fireplace, lit a match, and watched it burn. Some ghosts don't deserve to be carried. It's been 3 years since Diane died. 3 years since I stood in that hospital room with a toxicology report in my hands and understood that someone was trying to kill me. I still have nightmares sometimes. Dreams where I'm drinking tea that tastes like metal, where I can't move or speak, where I'm trapped in that cream-colored living room while Diane smiles and pores and watches me slowly die. But they're less frequent now. I finished my novel, about a woman who discovers her perfect life is built on lies. It got published last year. Did modestly well. My mother-in-law's story would have made a better book, honestly, but I can't bring myself to write it. Some stories are too close to tell. I'm teaching full-time now at a university 2 states away from where all of this happened. Fresh start. New city. New life. I don't date much. Trust is hard when someone who smiled at you every Sunday was simultaneously plotting your death. But I'm working on it. Therapy helps. Time helps more. Michael reached out last month. He's remarried, a nice woman named Jennifer who teaches kindergarten. They're expecting a baby. A girl. I wanted you to know, he said over email, that I'm naming my mother after her other grandmother. Not Diane. I can't. I can't pass that legacy on. I understood. Some names carry too much weight. We're not friends, Michael and I. We probably never will be. But there's a kind of peace between us now. An acknowledgement that we both survived something terrible and came out the other side damaged but alive. I think about Diane sometimes. About what drove her to such extremes. About whether she ever loved me at all or if I was always just an obstacle to be removed. I think about the arsenic in the teacup and the smile on her face as she poured it. I think about how evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a well-dressed woman with perfect manners and a warm hug and a concerned voice asking how you're feeling. And I think about how I almost didn't catch it. How close I came to dying because I was too polite, too eager to be liked, too willing to doubt my own instincts. But I did catch it. I saved myself. And in doing so, I learned something crucial. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones you need to watch the closest. I survived Diane Morrison's poison. The physical poison in the tea and vitamins, yes. But also the psychological poison, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the systematic erosion of my reality. And I came out stronger. I don't forgive her. I don't think I ever will. But I also don't hate her anymore. Hate requires too much energy, and I'd rather spend that energy building a life worth living. A life she tried to take from me but couldn't. Because in the end, that's the real victory, not that she went to prison, not that justice was served, but that I'm still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. Still choosing to believe in goodness despite everything I've seen. My mother-in-law tried to poison me. I pressed charges. She died in prison. And I lived to tell the story.